Thank you, Ava, for that comprehensive, excellent presentation. Thank you in particular for using in your description of me the adjective young. So I really appreciate that. And I wanted to mention too, you can see what Six Nations is doing in terms of bringing renewable energy on board in Ontario. The province of Ontario has also been very active in developing programs and initiatives in this area. They are working toward, if they haven't completed already, the elimination of all coal-burning power plants throughout the province. They also initiated a program for homeowners, micro-entrepreneurs, if you will, or micro-power developers through the microfit program that allows individual homeowners to generate renewable electricity and feed it back into the grid at above market rate return on that. So the province has been working very closely on this, First Nations like Six Nations as well, and I think we're actually seeing significant impact for that investment and that change in direction. Our next speaker and final speaker today is Rebecca Moore, who is engineering manager at Google, where she initiated and leads the development of Google Earth Engine, new technology platform that puts an unprecedented amount of satellite imagery online for the first time and enables scientists to conduct global-scale monitoring and measurement of changes in the Earth's environment. She also conceived and leads the Google Earth Outreach Program, which supports nonprofits, communities, and indigenous peoples around the world in applying Google's mapping tools to the world's pressing problems in the areas such as environmental conservation, human rights, and cultural preservation. Moore received a bachelor's degree with honors from Brown University in artificial intelligence and a master's degree from Stanford University. In 2013, she was recognized by the White House as a champion of change for open science. Welcome, Rebecca Moore.
Thank you, Tim. You getting the display going here? There we go, right here. Thanks very much for having me here. It's an honor actually to follow these two strong women leaders. So I think of Google in some ways as a tribe. We have more than 40,000 people now. We do have a number of Native American Googlers who have formed a network, the Google American Indian Network. There are a large number of us actually at Google, projects and individuals, who are working actively on how we can apply our tools and improve our tools and services to be of greater utility to First Nations, Aboriginal, and Indigenous people around the world, because in fact our tools are so kind of profoundly democratizing. Google Earth and Google Maps are used by more than 1 billion people every month. They're in more than 40 languages, and it's been exciting for my team to think about to partner with these different groups and make a real change in the world. So for me personally, this effort on using maps for good, applying maps for sustainable development, for environmental conservation, started in my own local community a few years ago. I live in the Santa Cruz Mountains of Northern California, which is a very beautiful area. It's got the largest old-growth forest left in Santa Clara County. But one day I opened the mail and I got this notice of intent to harvest timber, which did not sound good. The legend seemed to indicate that black lines were for a non-industrial timber management plan, whatever that is. The map was pretty sketchy, as you can see, pretty difficult to understand. I think more than 2,000 of my neighbors and I received this, and most people actually couldn't read it, and so they just threw it out. But I had just joined Google. Google Earth had just come out 2 months earlier, and whereas most people thought, what do you do with Google Earth? Well, you know, You fly to your home from space. Maybe you look at your neighbor's backyard from space, figure out where to go on vacation. I wondered if I could apply that high-resolution satellite imagery of Google Earth and that kind of ability to annotate it with information to get a better understanding of what this plan seemed to be. It looked like a logging plan, and I was concerned. So over one weekend, first I found the same area in Google Earth, and then I began to bring in the information that was indicated in the plan. You can already see that you have a better picture of what's going on. I showed where the schools and the daycare centers were. It became obvious that this was a 6-mile-long swath of a proposed logging area. They were going to use helicopters to remove the trees because the land was too steep to take the trees out by road. These helicopters were going to be landing and taking off in various places in our community in perpetuity if this plan was approved. And so there was a period where I was going from meeting to meeting. I was being asked by politicians, by the newspaper, by many, many members of the community to present the so-called Google Earth logging flyover of the proposed logging plan because it was so much more clear what was at stake when you could see it in Google Earth as opposed to looking at that little grainy map. And in fact, eventually, using Google Earth, my community and I were able to prove that not only was this logging plan a bad idea, it was going to harm water quality, it was going to increase fire danger, but we actually used Google Earth to prove that the plan was illegal, and we stopped the logging. The area is now being considered for permanent protection as open space. So I had not originally been an activist. I was just a computer nerd who loved my community and loved nature, but I found that Google Earth was a surprisingly powerful tool. The word got out that Google Earth could be used in this way, and I began to be contacted by lots of nonprofits, and even one day an indigenous Amazon chief, Chief Almir Surui, traveled all the way from Brazil to Google headquarters to meet with us to ask us to help him defend his territory in the Brazilian Amazon. I have a short film that I'd like to show you that tells the story of this unique partnership.
Companheiro Almir, ele sonhou bom. Eu quero que o povo Suruí entenda o sonho dele. O que é que Suruí transformar sem de matar da floresta para viver com a floresta.
Nós podia fazer uma entrega de certificados aqui. Parabéns.
Parabéns.
A gente finalizando nosso sonho, né? Nossa ideia de colocar a história do Suruí dentro do Google Earth.
It all started in June 2007 when Chief Almir came to Google for the first time.
Perguntei para a Rebeca se tinha como o Google colocar mapa cultural do nosso território.
Chief Almir had seen some of our work that we've done in other areas with mapping. We just brought them together with the specialists and helped them create their own map. They mapped historical sites, plants where animals occur. From there, they published their plan for how they were going to manage their territory. Also has become the basis for their carbon projects.
Chief Almir put up the cultural map, I brought up Google Earth, and we flew to Suruí. And when you fly to the Suruí territory in Google Earth, it's very dramatic. You could see that the Suruí territory is a beautiful virgin green forest, but it's surrounded by complete deforestation.
Nós estamos protegendo o nosso território. Essa aqui é outra entrada dos madeireiros. A gente está denunciando. Nós estamos fazendo a nossa parte e arriscando nossa vida ainda para conservar o meio ambiente também. Quem está fazendo a ilegalidade tem que ser punido, né?
Chief Almir told his father that the time had come to put down the bow and arrow and to pick up the laptop.
E eu sei que é uma grande responsabilidade nós lidar com uma cultura tão diferente da nossa, que é tecnologia, né? Mas não é impossível.
The first thing to do is to move the earth. So the way you do that is you click with the left mouse button.
The first training we did in June 2008, and we trained the Surui on a whole set of different Google technologies.
Aí eles estão ensinando a gente, porque vai ajudar a gente a divulgar a nossa cultura, que não é muito divulgada no Brasil, nos países.
Chief Almir asked would we help him put his people on the map and use this to strengthen his people and tell the world what's happening. The next year, 2009, I came back and brought Google Android smartphones with special software that would allow you to go out into the forest and collect information.
74.
Push the button, submit it over the phone network, and it goes onto a Google map.
So the Sui today use that to monitor their biodiversity, to monitor their borders, and also to monitor their forest in the context of climate change. This is the first project really where the Indians themselves are the ones measuring the carbon. And so the technology allows them to become the carbon monitors.
O Projeto Carbono Suruí é um projeto pioneiro hoje, para que oriente a consciência mais verde.
The Sui are avoiding deforestation, and they now have the very first internationally validated carbon project in the Brazilian Amazon.
Então, oferecer ao mercado o serviço que a floresta tem para diminuir o gás de estufa.
Mas se a gente pensar nos suruís como um modelo, você pode replicar isso em outras áreas indígenas.
This is açaí.
We worked with them to create a 3D visualization of their forest with replicas of all the indigenous trees in their forest.
Uau! Que bom!
And we virtually planted something like 90 million trees in 3D in Google Earth on the Surui territory.
First photos, then videos, then stories.
Now in 2012, we're back for another training, and this time to finish the cultural map.
Eu acho que essa tecnologia vai ajudar muito a nossa cultura, entende? Porque os mais velhos estão morrendo e eles estão passando esse conhecimento pra gente.
Nós estamos juntos, né, lutando e acreditando num mecanismo para a gente se comunicar, né, trazer um diálogo com o mundo a partir de uso de tecnologia.
The cultural map is going to become a new digital way to share their culture, their story, and get that published for the world. So since the time that film was created, the Surowi have now succeeded in being the first indigenous-led so-called RED project, reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. They have sold 120,000 tons of carbon offsets to the largest Brazilian cosmetics company, Natura. And there's that was just done last September. This is bringing millions of dollars of sustainable development into this community. I like Chief Elmir's quote at the end. He says, RED Plus is a bridge between the indigenous world and the non-indigenous world, so it's an appropriate way to begin this process. It creates a vehicle through which the capitalist system can recognize the value of standing forests, and indigenous people can be rewarded for preserving them. I learned a word in Portuguese, socio-ambiental, social environmental, and the concept is you cannot separate people and culture from their environment. So the success of that project with the Surowi gained a lot of attention, and we began to be contacted by many indigenous peoples around the world, First Nations, Aboriginal people. Here's an example of a beautiful artistic cultural map that was just created recently by, I believe they're the oldest continuously occupied landscape, the oldest tribe, Aboriginal people in the world, in Western Australia, Ngarluma and Ngara. They live here in the northwest coast of Australia. They created these beautiful icons denoting cultural sites. And one of the things we've observed is maps are an expression of culture. The kinds of symbols that you create depend very much on what you value. So a certain tribe in the Amazon had something like 6 or 8 different symbols for fishing spot because their entire protein sustenance depended on fish. So they needed to know, where do you fish with a net? Where do you fish with a spear? Where do you fish with certain plants that have a toxin that knocks the fish out? And the same is true here in this case, where water holes, for example, are quite important. Beautiful, beautiful art that is captured in this cultural map. And they also recorded videos of the elders telling some of the history. So moving a little closer to home, as we began to work with the National Congress of American Indians, and I want to give them a shout out. NCAI has been fantastic partner for us to help us understand what are the most common issues, for example, that we could address by improving our mapping tools. One of the things that came up was we have borders and roads, we have state boundaries, but we did not have in Google Maps the labels of Indian reservations. And I'm happy to say that just in the last 2 weeks, now we do. Here's an example of what Google Maps looked like a month ago and what it looks like today. The Skokomish Indian Reservation is now properly reflected. I'll give you a few examples here. Now you see the Navajo Indian Reservation. Here's Yakima Indian Reservation in Washington. In Google Maps, you can also get what we call Earth view, so you can get the satellite imagery and even an oblique view. This is all in Google Maps. East Coast, here's the Eastern Cherokee Indian Reservation as it looks today now in Google Maps. Again, you can see the satellite imagery. Blackfeet Indian Reservation in Montana. Here we are in the northern westernmost part of the lower 48, Makah Indian Reservation, which looks quite beautiful. And again, you can zoom all the way in and you can see great detail. So with that, we believe that Google Maps will itself be a better storytelling tool, a more useful tool also for tribal governance, for even as simple as giving people directions to facilities and so on the territory. We did a training at the request of the Navajo Nation a couple of years ago. They're interested in telling creating a story around the potential for solar energy on their land. And we learned in working with them and many other tribes that Google Earth can be a very potent tool for storytelling because it places not only the problems and the issues, but the dreams and the ideas of people on the landscape. And this is worth viewing if you have a chance. I don't have time to play it today. I did want to mention this one too. This just came out last week, a beautiful story about First Nation in British Columbia. Let's see if I can pronounce it correctly. Tsuminis. I bet you might help me pronounce it. But here's a tribal elder, Ray Harris, who said he had spent a long time keeping his secret places, but now he wants people to know about them. He thinks it's important for people to understand more about these landmarks and these traditional names. So let's see if we can go here. Here's a story about that. Short story.
Ray Harris has been fishing the Salish Sea all his life. An elder in the Chemainus First Nation, he grew up on these shores, overlooking the town of Ladysmith. And his people have lived here for thousands of years.
Our story is that before the disease decimated our people, there was 2,000 or more people living here. It was a huge village.
This history is now being preserved on Google Earth. Anthropologist Brian Tom from the University of Victoria is working with First Nations to embed the digital mapping service with traditional knowledge.
Right there, beside that big tree, just behind that big tree, there was a dig, an archaeological dig, when we put a water line in there. And 2 hearths were found. Rock work as intricate as any rock work in the world. One with an oven. And the carbon dating tested on there was 7,000 years and better. We've been here forever.
These stories will make their way into links on Google Earth. The California-based software company is supporting projects like this one for indigenous people around the world, providing a unique street view that can help First Nations protect their land and culture.
I think everybody understands the inherent value of the cultural stories about why land is important. I mean, I think it's just inherently important to know where you are, to know the sort of mythic history of these places. Google appreciates that their maps can be really enriched with those kind of stories.
Ray Harris learned the traditional place names and stories from his elders. Now he's sharing them not just with his children, but with his neighbors anywhere in the world.
So one of the very, very important points I wanted to make as I'm giving these examples of how indigenous communities and Aboriginal and First Nations are choosing to publish information is that there's much information that groups do not want to make public. It may be sacred sites, sites of important locations that they would like to keep private. And we offer a variety of tools that allow organizations to create maps that are private, in addition to choosing, if they wish, to make certain information public. So I want to make that very clear, because that is quite important to virtually every single indigenous group that we have worked with. The last point I just wanted to mention, and we don't have much time to talk about it, but a new tool that my team has developed is called Google Earth Engine, and we call it an engine because it's an analytical engine for environmental data, for Earth data. Because in fact, as we all know, the Earth is changing, in many cases under our influence, the Anthropocene era. In some cases, there are natural processes. This is an example, for example, of deforestation. So we've done a project to bring off of out of many dusty government archives the last 40 years of satellite imagery and other environmental data of the planet, and we're also getting data every day, fresh imagery and other environmental data, weather data and so on, every day, and we're making it available with easy-to-use tools and compute power to do things like detect deforestation, measure retreat of glaciers. People are using it to estimate crop yield or to detect water resource availability. We're now seeing that there are a number of indigenous groups that are interested in using this compute power over this massive data archive of environmental data for their own projects on their own landscapes. These are some examples of things that you can see in this 40-year history of the planet. Glaciers retreating, the development of irrigation in the middle of the desert. Dubai wanted to create more beachfronts, so they built the artificial palm islands over the last 30 years, I guess. And then the bottom right one is actually, you can see the time course of deforestation in the Brazilian Amazon. So kind of wrapping it all up, with maps, what are some of the things you can do that are really relevant to indigenous communities? Well, the most basic one that I found useful in my case was showing people. It's one thing to give people graphs and charts, text and so on, but if you can show them the planet and show them what's happening in a place, you can convey a huge amount of information in seconds, often to busy policymakers, and you can actually have a profound impact on galvanizing your community all the way up to changing policy, changing the law. We've found that it's a wonderful tool for preserving traditional knowledge and culture, as you've seen some examples today, linking elders with young people. In many cases, sovereignty claims are still being contested, and if tribes can show a pattern of occupation and use of a land, then it strengthens their claim. Maps are a very powerful tool for doing that. And finally, you've seen some examples today of how groups can use this kind of mapping technology and data to support alternative livelihoods, alternative futures that are good for the tribe and good for the earth. So if you want to learn more, you can go to earth.google.com/outreach or just Google Earth Outreach. We've got a lot of tutorials and case studies there. We also have a training coming up in November, the Geo for Good training, that already a number of folks have applied for, indigenous folks, to get the crash course on our tools. So thank you very much.